Venezuela, a country once home to a colossal oil treasure, now stands at a historic turning point. President Donald Trump has just declared that Venezuela will turn over 50 million barrels of oil to the United States. This is not just a staggering number. It symbolizes a revolution in global politics. But what does this really mean? The U.S. is not just controlling resources anymore. They are controlling the destiny of an entire nation. Millions of Venezuelan lives now face an uncertain future. And the biggest question is, will this actually benefit Venezuela? And how will this shift the global balance? Join me, Fareed Zakaria, as we explore a story not just about oil, but about power, change, and the future of international politics. So, what's at the heart of this dramatic shift? Venezuela is one of the most oil-rich countries in the world, yet its oil production has been in decline for over a decade. Once, Venezuela's oil flowed like a river, fueling not just its economy, but the economies of countries around the globe. But today, the situation is grim. The country's oil infrastructure is crumbling. Years of mismanagement, combined with international sanctions and internal political chaos, have left Venezuela struggling to maintain its former power. And now, the U.S. is stepping in, promising to restore Venezuela's oil industry, at least in part, under their control. But there's a twist. This isn't just about oil. This is about geopolitics, influence, and a deepening rivalry between the U.S. and other global powers like China and Russia, who have also placed their stakes in Venezuela. So, what's really at play here? And what does the future hold for Venezuela, for the U.S., and for the rest of the world? Let's dig deeper. To understand this moment, we need to look at Venezuela's past. It all began in the mid-20th century when oil was first discovered in abundance in Venezuela. For decades, it was a source of immense wealth, making the country one of the richest in Latin America. But with great wealth comes great temptation, and for Venezuela, it led to mismanagement and corruption. In the 1,970 seconds, the government nationalized the oil industry, taking control of the country's most valuable resource. While this move was meant to ensure that Venezuela could benefit from its own oil, it also began a long history of political instability and economic missteps. The turning point came in 1998 when Hugo Chavez came to power. He introduced socialist reforms that promised to redistribute the country's wealth. While some of his policies were popular, others isolated Venezuela from the global market, pushing away foreign investment and stalling the oil industry's growth. Fast forward to today, and we see the result of decades of poor decisions, political turmoil, and external sanctions. Venezuela's oil reserves may still be the largest in the world, but the country is barely scraping by. The crisis we're witnessing today didn't happen overnight. It's the culmination of decades of economic mismanagement, authoritarian rule, and the changing tides of international politics. Then, the first major explosion happened. On the 23rd of January 2019, the U.S. recognized Juan Guaidó as the legitimate president of Venezuela. It was a direct challenge to Nicolas Maduro's authority, which had already been shaky. The move was bold, aggressive, and set the stage for a dramatic escalation. In response, Maduro clung to power, supported by military forces, Russia, and China. But Guaidó's rise, backed by the U.S., created a crisis in Venezuela, one that extended far beyond its borders. The country was divided, families were torn apart, and the international community was forced to choose sides. The question wasn't just about who would control Venezuela's government. It was about who would control its oil, its future, and its place in the global order. As tensions mounted, economic sanctions crippled Venezuela. The U.S. targeted its oil exports, making it even harder for the country to stay afloat. This wasn't just a political conflict, it was a war over resources, power, and influence. And the ripple effect was felt globally. Countries like China and Russia, already deeply invested in Venezuela, had to respond. The game was on. Behind this crisis lies a complex, hidden mechanism. It's not just about politics. It's about control over a resource that powers the world, oil. Venezuela's oil industry is a tangled web of interests. While the US pushes for access, China and Russia have long-standing partnerships with the country. These countries have invested heavily in Venezuela's oil infrastructure with the hope of securing long-term benefits. But there's more at play here than just economic gain. Oil is a powerful tool of influence. In the case of Venezuela, it has become a symbol of sovereignty, power, and international leverage. The US sees the ability to control Venezuela's oil as a way to not only weaken Maduro, but also to gain an edge over China and Russia in the region. For China, Venezuela's oil reserves are an important part of its Belt and Road Initiative. For Russia, access to Venezuela's oil has become a key element of its strategy to regain influence in Latin America. But while these foreign powers push and pull for control, the Venezuelan people suffer the consequences. This is a battle not just for oil, but for the soul of Venezuela itself. And while the global powers fight over the resources, it's the people of Venezuela who bear the brunt of this conflict. Then came the second explosion, a more direct confrontation. The US doubled down on its position. Trump's announcement that Venezuela would turn over 50 million barrels of oil to the United States was more than just a policy change. It was a declaration of dominance. This move sent shockwaves through the international community. Venezuela was already in the midst of a political storm, and now this bold declaration added fuel to the fire. Maduro's government, already fighting for survival, was thrown into even deeper turmoil. The pressure from both the US and its allies, combined with the internal struggle for control, created a perfect storm. For the people of Venezuela, the situation couldn't have been worse. Hyperinflation, food shortages, and political instability had already made daily life unbearable. Now, the possibility of the US taking control of the country's oil resources added a new layer of uncertainty and fear. Would Venezuela be stripped of its sovereignty? Would the people lose control over their own future? Meanwhile, countries like China and Russia responded swiftly. They condemned the US actions, calling it a violation of international law and a blatant act of bullying. The geopolitical ramifications were huge. This wasn't just a fight for Venezuela's oil. It was a battle for global influence, for the future of the international order. The crisis was no longer just about Venezuela. It was about the world's power structure shifting in real time. As the political and economic crises mount, it is the people of Venezuela who bear the heaviest burden. For years, they have lived through a constant state of fear, uncertainty, and suffering. Hyperinflation has made everyday items unaffordable. Millions of Venezuelans are fleeing their country, seeking refuge in neighboring nations as they search for a chance at survival. But the story isn't just one of despair. It's a story of resilience. Despite the chaos, despite the hardship, the Venezuelan people continue to fight for a better future. They dream of a return to the country's once prosperous past, where oil was a source of national pride and wealth. Yet, with every passing day, hope fades a little more. The world watches as Venezuela's fate unfolds, but for the people on the ground, this is more than just a political struggle, it's a fight for their very lives. And now, as Trump moves forward with his plan to control Venezuela's oil, the stakes are higher than ever. Will the Venezuelan people see any of the benefits from their country's oil reserves, or will they be forced to watch as their future slips further out of their hands? This is the emotional core of the crisis. A people caught in the crossfire of international politics, trying to hold on to their dignity and their dreams. The crisis in Venezuela is not contained within its borders. It is a global event with far-reaching consequences. When the US seizes control of Venezuela's oil, it sends a strong message to the rest of the world. No nation is truly sovereign when it comes to resources, especially oil. For China and Russia, this is more than just a dispute over oil. It's a direct challenge to their influence in Latin America. Both countries have invested billions into Venezuela's oil sector, hoping to secure long-term access to one of the largest oil reserves in the world. Now, their investments are in jeopardy, and their political ties to Venezuela are at risk. This shift in power could redefine the global energy landscape. If the U.S. gains control over Venezuela's oil, it strengthens its position in the global oil market. It also limits China and Russia's ability to expand their influence in the region, especially as both countries are already engaged in a battle for dominance in other parts of the world. But it's not just about oil. This is about a geopolitical power struggle, a fight to shape the future of international relations. The implications stretch far beyond Venezuela, affecting trade agreements, alliances, and the delicate balance of power in the world. And while the focus may be on oil, the true battle is for control over the future of global politics. So, what does the future hold for Venezuela? There are three possible scenarios that could unfold. Each of them carries its own implications, not just for Venezuela, but for the world. Scenario 1, the optimistic outcome. In the best-case scenario, the U.S. successfully helps rebuild Venezuela's oil infrastructure. American companies invest billions, creating jobs and stabilizing the country's economy. Venezuela's oil production soars once again, and the people begin to see tangible improvements in their lives. With the help of international cooperation, Venezuela becomes a beacon of recovery in the region. But this scenario is far from guaranteed. The path to rebuilding Venezuela's oil industry is long and fraught with challenges. Even with foreign investment, the country's infrastructure is in shambles, and it could take years, if not decades, to restore it to its former glory. Scenario 2, the middle ground. In a more likely scenario, Venezuela's oil industry begins a slow, steady recovery. The U.S. has a hand in stabilizing the country, but the recovery is uneven, with some regions seeing progress while others remain in turmoil. The political situation remains fragile, with Maduro's loyalists continuing to resist the changes. International actors like China and Russia still have influence, complicating any effort to fully restore Venezuela's independence. While not a disaster, this scenario presents a future of instability where the potential for future crises is always looming. Scenario 3, the worst-case outcome. In the worst-case scenario, the power struggle continues to escalate. The U.S. pushes further into Venezuela's political and economic spheres, but the resistance grows. Maduro's government, along with factions of the military and supporters from Russia and China, continue to hold out. The country fractures into further chaos, and the human suffering intensifies. Venezuela's oil production stagnates, as international investment is deterred by the growing instability. This scenario would not only be a catastrophe for Venezuela, but could trigger a broader geopolitical conflict, pulling in global powers like the US, China, Russia, and even the EU. As we look ahead, one thing is clear: Venezuela's fate is not just in its own hands. It is now part of a global struggle for power, resources, and influence. The stakes are higher than ever. This is not just about oil. It's about what kind of world we want to live in and how much power we are willing to allow a few countries to wield over the many. Venezuela is a microcosm of the larger geopolitical battles taking place across the globe. A country once rich in resources now faces the harsh reality of a broken system, internal conflict, and external pressures. The path forward is uncertain, and whether the country will ever return to its former glory remains to be seen. But there is a glimmer of hope. If the world can come together, if nations can put aside their rivalries for a moment, there is a chance for recovery. Venezuela could rise again, not as a pawn in a game of global power, but as a sovereign nation reclaiming its place in the world. But that future won't come easily. It will take more than just oil to rebuild a nation. It will take leadership, vision, and most importantly, a commitment to the Venezuelan people. As we watch this unfold, we must ask ourselves, what role will we play in shaping the future of Venezuela and the world? This is not just Venezuela's story, it's our story too.